It's no secret, I love my gadgets. Sometimes I think that might be why I continue to work in this industry. There are always new gadgets to try out. Take a look at my desktop. DaVinci Resolve Minipanel, StreamDeck, trackball, Avid controller dock, 2 more StreamDecks, and a StreamDeck XL. I love it. All these StreamDecks and controllers and panel is all there for a goal of helping me never touch the keyboard and mouse while working. That's my goal. I understand that goal is not realistic, but in the last couple of years it has really helped bring down the amount that I am touching the mouse and the keyboard. And so that's just a good thing. The StreamDecks in particular are really handy devices. You can program them in so many different ways, and honestly, they look really cool. But this isn't about setting up StreamDecks, although that video is coming. This is about aesthetics and positioning of them. Now, the StreamDecks do come with their own stands. In a regular StreamDeck, you get this little plastic stand that you have to adjust the angle of it, and it's just a cheap piece of plastic. In the case of the XL, you do get a much beefier stand. It falls over when it's on the desk, it slides all over the place, but it's not necessarily at the right angle for you. And again, that becomes an issue of your sight lines, it becomes an issue of your hand position, where to build your own custom box, now you can avoid all those problems. So I turned to my 3D printer to build this combo box for the XL and 2 regular ones. I love it. The angle is great and they don't move around. But over here on the Minipanel side, I haven't built a box for anything yet. I did some scanning and I've built a template for a box for the trackball, and my idea was the trackball and the StreamDeck would sit about this height next to the panel. But then I started thinking, what if the StreamDeck was on the other side? What if the StreamDeck was in the back and was actually at the height or the angle of the panel? That would be cool. And then the trackball could sit in front of it. And then I thought, what if I took my 4th StreamDeck? Yeah, I know, I've got way too many StreamDecks. What if I took the 4th StreamDeck? What if I put 2 StreamDecks on the panel and then put the trackball in front of that? That would be really cool. What if I then painted the boxes to match the look of the Resolve panel? That would look awesome and be incredibly useful. Well, back to reality now. I would love to snap my finger and say, here it is. But that isn't what YouTube is about, is it? So at this point, I really haven't done too much to design and build any of these parts. I have a basic design for the trackball box, but other than that, I've got nothing. So here's the plan. And at the start of this adventure, I have no idea how long this is going to take, but we're going to see it through, maybe over the course of several videos. My goal is to scan the Minipanel, or at least this side of the Minipanel, because I want to get the angle and the height of the panel to build the box to incorporate into it as much as possible. I then can take that model into Fusion 360 and do a proper build of a part that can be printed on my 3D printer. I then may rescan the trackball to clean up some of what I've learned about scanning since I got the scanner. We'll see. Then we'll incorporate all those elements into models that can be printed on my 3D printer. Then we'll paint it, and finally we will snap our fingers and say, so here it is. Sound interesting? I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be time consuming, and I think it'll be frustrating. But then that's what life is all about. So let's start by scanning the panel. Okay, the rules of 3D scanning. We went over these in my review of the scanner. No black objects and no shiny objects. We're not off to a great start, are we? I told you this was going to be frustrating. But before we panic and start spraying dull spray all over my very expensive panel, let's try a couple of scans and see what we're dealing with. Now this is a pretty heavy object, and I know it's far too heavy for the turntable that the scanner comes with. So what I'll do is I'll set up the scanner on a tripod instead, and I will place the Resolve panel on a much cheaper turntable that I bought on Amazon that can handle the weight. So the first thing I want to do is just take a couple of quick scans here and see at what position this tripod needs to sit. Now the scanner that I've got is the Einscan SE, and it comes with, it's a very easy scanner to set up. There are no instructions about using a tripod instead of the actual turntable setup that this device comes with. So I've kind of left to my own devices here. Set up the tripod, take a scan, see what we end up with. But as this scan completes, we end up with absolutely nothing. So I've decided that my tripod is a little too far away. Now the whole idea of the tripod is you can scan larger objects. But in the end, the object I think still has to be relatively similar in distance from the scanner as it would be if it was on the turntable. Because even the second scan, I end up with nothing. We do eventually get to a point where we do get a scan. So we've dropped the tripod down. Again, we brought it in just a little bit closer. We've adjusted our brightness a little bit. Hit that scan button for, I think we're on the third attempt at a scan now. Just to see if we can even see this device. And finally, there we go. There is the side and a little bit of the top. So from an initial take, that initial scan clearly needs a little bit of help. But honestly, if I really wanted to, I could probably take that and use it to draw a shape inside Fusion 360, and I'd probably get a pretty accurate representation of the panel, of that one angle, and even a little bit of the height. But I want to see how far we can get it, how close we can get to a really, really accurate scan. So what I did was I took some masking tape and some dry shampoo. I masked off the edges, not that I could paint it or anything like that, but just a nice clean masking tape job on the top edge and a little bit of the side to help show the scanner where the edges and the black are. For the shiny material, it's not really that shiny, but it's shiny enough that it's giving the scanner a little bit of issue. That's where I used the dry shampoo, give it a light spray, tried to protect my panel as much as possible. And on the very back, I did a little bit of masking as well. It's not at all imperative for how we're going to build this. I really just need the side and the angle on this. But again, I like to see how far you can get it, how close you can get it. At some point as we turn towards the back, it's going to lose the information because I'm not masking the entire panel up. I just want to get this one angle done. So after the mask job is done, this is how the next round of scanning turned out. And wow, what a difference. that looks really good. Again, a little bit in that crevice there. We'll see if we can fix that. Here's a button. We'll remove that button. You can see a little bit in the shape on the top there of the masking tape, but that's not anything that I'm concerned with. I just want the side and that angle. Do a little bit of a turn on the angle of the panel itself. Do another scan. And get another pretty solid scan. Get this button one more time. We'll take it off one more time. And we will tell this to combine those two scans together. And that looks pretty good. I almost feel like I could have stopped right now, but that's not how I roll. Let's try. Let's go see how many of these we can do before it starts falling apart on us, because we've hit an angle that it just can't handle anymore. Still going pretty strong. It's giving me a really good view of that indentation, actually. Wow, what a difference a little bit of masking tape makes. Yeah, it's not a perfect scan. Doesn't need to be a perfect scan. I just want the angle, the height, and an overview of the shape of the side of the panel. And I think I got that. I think we can now take that into Fusion 360, and from there we can extrapolate a little more precise shape of this mini panel to help us build these boxes from. Inside Fusion 360 now, we're going to insert the STL file that we just created and exported out of the scanning program. Now, I have done this on a couple of different scans I've done in the past. These are really large files that come in, and they're very hard to work with because they are so large. And one of the first things I have to do when I bring this in is try to get it oriented to the proper ground plane. And that is a time-consuming process because they are so chunky, these files are so big, there are so many faces on these models. So what I'm doing here, and I've sped this up a little bit to try to cut to the chase, so to speak, is I'm just rotating and twisting and turning. And at one point I did draw a shape of what I had, and I oriented to that, and I just kept fighting and working with this until I finally got this to the point where I felt it was close enough to the ground plane that we could move on to the next section of this process. But again, this part does take a little bit of effort. I've got a pretty hefty machine, but it really bogs down. Every time you try to twist the angle on this, you're waiting 2 or 3 seconds to get the program to refresh. So we're anything but perfect on the ground plane, but I think it's good enough that we can move on to the next stage. One thing I just wanted to point out was what I did on this one side right along here was I made it square. I made it kind of on a right angle to the ground plane, which isn't necessarily correct for the panel. The panel has a little bit of a curve in it, but because the bottom of the panel is curved under at the very bottom, it's hard to measure what the distance is from top to bottom. So I think that's just something I'll have to deal with later. It's this angle in here that I'm really concerned with. This line along here, this angle up here, this is the part that I really want the build to try to match for when I build a box. The rest of it we can deal with in the modeling process and the design process. So I think from this standpoint, we're ready to move on to the next stage. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take the model that I have, and I'm going to use that essentially as a background element that I can then go and trace a Boolean curve around, or a spline curve around, to try to replicate the shape a little tighter. Now we have some pretty good edges on this model. We have, because of the nature of the panel with the black and the silver, and we have a couple of different lips that are showing up, we're going to take the top edge of most of it and redraw it in Fusion 360 into what is called a sketch. We can then extrude that sketch just again for a basic, what I like to call a pretend or a proxy panel shape. That fake panel is going to give us the angle of the top and the side to help us decide how to orient 2 StreamDeck boxes on it. My shape at the onset is going to be horrible, but it will be a very generic shape. After I get to that point, I will then add some points into that shape, and I will adjust those points to more closely tune in or line up with the actual shape of the panel that we have scanned. Once I get to that section, I'm happy with my new shape, then we will do the extrusion on that shape, and that will give us a nice fake Resolve Minipanel that we can now use as a building block for our boxes. Now originally when I built my first StreamDeck boxes for the XL and the 2 regular StreamDecks, I obviously had done those ahead of time because I did those a few months ago. So through the course of building those, I do have the shape of a box that will hold a StreamDeck in my Fusion 360 program somewhere. Also within that aspect, I have my fake StreamDeck that I used, much in the same template, or much for the same reason we're building a fake mini panel. It helps to have the device you're trying to build around to make sure everything's going to fit. So what I've done is I have taken that fake StreamDeck and I've brought it into this project. That now lets me take it, line it up on the edges and the corners of the mini panel, position it at the height I want it at, position it at the distance from the panel I want it at. I have to be careful as I do this. There's a lip around the StreamDeck, so I have to allow for that lip. It's an extra 2 millimeters on each side of the StreamDeck that it juts out. That lip will be used to sit on top of the box. So I have to kind of take that into consideration as I'm doing all of this. But in the end, it does allow me to really visualize how two StreamDecks can work inside this system. Or can they? Are they going to be too big? You know, at what angle is the lower StreamDeck compared to the upper StreamDeck? So I've copied my StreamDecks, and I'm now going to bring a second one in underneath it and try to decide, does it fit? Is it too big? Is there enough room for it and a trackball? Am I better off with just one? And again, what angle should it be on the mini panel? So it's just a little bit of play right here. You're just playing with angles and positions and trying to visualize both on screen and in your head whether or not this is going to work. And I think I get to the point where I'm pretty happy with the layout of these two StreamDecks. Now that we've got two StreamDecks positioned visually as how they might lay out, our next step is to build a box around those StreamDecks. That's going to be the topic of the next video. For now, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go have some lunch. I suggest you go have some lunch. Even if it's not lunchtime right now, I suggest you go have some lunch. We'll all feel better after lunch. It's been a long morning of trying to maneuver the scanner and Fusion 360 and the model, and time for a break. In the next video, I will build the box and we will do a test print of that box. That test print will tell us if what we've done so far has been useful or a total waste of time. And it wouldn't be the first time something I did was a total waste of time. But you'll have to come back and see how that video comes out. Thanks for watching.